What's going on, everyone? This is Wrestling Frenzy, and I need you to stop scrolling right now because what I'm about to tell you is going to absolutely blow your mind and make you question everything you thought you knew about loyalty, about power, and about what happens when a faction that was supposed to dominate the wrestling world completely turns on itself in the most violent and shocking way imaginable. I'm talking about the Vision, the group that was positioned to be the most dominant force in WWE history, the faction that had all the tools and all the talent to run this company for years, completely imploding on live television in a betrayal so brutal, so unexpected, so absolutely devastating that the entire arena sat in stunned silence trying to process what they just witnessed. And here's what's going to make you lose your mind, here's what's going to have you screaming at your screen and rushing to the comment section. The people who turned, the people who orchestrated this attack, are not who you think they are, and the way they executed this betrayal shows a level of calculation and ruthlessness that nobody saw coming. If you're not subscribed to Wrestling Discuss right now, hit that subscribe button immediately and turn on notifications because I'm about to break down every single detail of the most shocking live attack in recent WWE history, explain exactly who turned on who and why, reveal the backstage politics that led to this moment, and tell you what this means for everyone involved moving forward. Smash that like button, get ready to drop your thoughts in the comments, because what went down on Raw is going to change the entire landscape of WWE and you need to hear every detail from Wrestling Discuss, the only channel that gives you the unfiltered truth about what's really happening in professional wrestling. Now before I get into the specifics of this attack, before I tell you exactly who did what and why the entire wrestling world is in complete chaos right now, I need to give you the context because what happened on Raw didn't come out of nowhere. This has been building for months and the signs were there for anyone who was paying close enough attention. The Vision was formed with this grand idea of bringing together the most physically dominant and intimidating forces in WWE under one unified banner, creating an unstoppable faction that would control championships, dominate storylines, and basically hold the entire company hostage to their collective will. On paper, this should have worked perfectly. You had Brock Lesnar, the most legitimate tough guy in wrestling, someone whose presence alone makes everyone else look small. You had Paul Heymon, the brilliant strategist and master manipulator who's elevated numerous wrestlers to legendary status over his career. You had Bronson Reed, an absolute monster of a man who moves like someone half his size and hits like a freight train. You had Bron Breakker, the genetic freak with the famous last name who was being positioned as WWE's next big main event star. And you had other talented individuals who bought into this vision of collective dominance and united purpose. But here's what nobody accounted for when the Vision was formed, and this is the critical mistake that led to everything falling apart. You cannot put a group of alpha personalities together, all of whom have massive egos and individual ambitions, and expect them to work together harmoniously without a clear hierarchy and clear leadership structure. From the very beginning, there were tensions within the Vision about who was actually in charge and whose vision they were supposed to be following. Brock Lesnar thought he should be the unquestioned leader because he's the most physically dominant and the most accomplished. Paul Heyman thought he should be the mastermind calling the shots because he's the smartest person in any room and has the strategic brilliance to guide the group to sustained success. Bronson Reed and Bron Breakker, meanwhile, were quietly forming their own alliance and making their own plans, playing both Brock and Paul against each other while positioning themselves for their own eventual rise to power. And none of these competing agendas were ever properly addressed or resolved. They were just allowed to simmer and fester beneath the surface while everyone pretended that everything was fine and that they were all working toward the same goals. The crack started showing weeks ago when Brock and Paul's relationship began deteriorating publicly, when they started openly disagreeing about strategy and direction, when it became clear to everyone watching that these two men who had worked together for so long could no longer stand each other. Then you had the situation where Bronson Reed and Bron Breakker attacked each other in that shocking backstage brawl that Wrestling Discuss covered extensively, where these two men who were supposed to be united suddenly tried to destroy each other because of their own power struggle and their own inability to share the spotlight. The Vision went from being this unified dominant force to being a collection of individuals who happened to wear the same colors but who were all secretly pursuing their own agendas and undermining each other at every opportunity. And everyone knew that eventually something was going to break, that eventually the tensions would boil over into something catastrophic, but nobody could have predicted the specific way it would happen or who would make the first move to completely destroy the faction from within. So let me take you through exactly what happened on Raw, moment by moment, because every detail of this attack is important and by the time I'm done explaining it you're going to understand why this is one of the most significant moments in recent WWE history. The show was progressing normally. There had been some segments earlier in the night involving various members of the Vision. The announcers had been talking about the known tensions within the group but also suggesting that maybe they could work through their issues and get back on the same page. Then we got to a segment where the Vision was supposed to have a meeting in the ring. All the major members were supposed to come out and address the WWE universe about their future and about how they were going to move forward despite their internal conflicts. Now, if you're a long-time wrestling fan and you've been subscribed to Wrestling Discuss for any length of time, you know that when a faction calls a meeting in the ring to address their issues, that's usually when everything goes to hell. That's when the betrayals happen and the attacks occur and the group falls apart. So smart fans were already on edge, already expecting something to go wrong, but I promise you that what actually happened was so much more shocking and so much more complex than anyone anticipated. Brock Lesnar came out first, which made sense because Brock sees himself as the alpha of the group and expects everyone else to defer to him. He stood in the ring with that intense look he always has, waiting for the other members to join him. Paul Heyman came out next, and you could immediately see the tension between him and Brock, the way they positioned themselves on opposite sides of the ring, the way they avoided making eye contact, the way Paul's usual confident demeanor was replaced with visible nervousness and uncertainty. Then Bronson Reed's music hit, and he came out looking absolutely furious, still clearly angry about everything that had happened with Bron Breakker, still seething with barely controlled rage. And then Bron Breakker came out, and the atmosphere in the arena became electric with tension because everyone remembered that these two men had tried to kill each other just days earlier. Everyone was wondering if they were going to be able to coexist in the ring or if they were going to immediately start fighting again. For a few moments, everyone just stood there in the ring, these four powerful men who were supposed to be united but who clearly couldn't stand each other, and the silence was deafening. The crowd was buzzing with anticipation, waiting to see who would speak first, waiting to see if someone was going to throw the first punch, waiting for the inevitable explosion. Paul Heyman, being the verbose talker that he is, finally grabbed a microphone and started to speak, trying to address the issues within the group, trying to suggest ways they could move forward, trying to use his verbal skills to smooth over the massive cracks in their foundation. But you could hear in his voice that he didn't believe his own words, that he knew this wasn't going to work, that he was just going through the motions because he didn't know what else to do. And that's when it happened, and I need everyone watching to understand that what I'm about to describe was so shocking, so completely unexpected, that the crowd reaction was delayed by several seconds because people's brains couldn't process what their eyes were seeing. Bronson Reed, who everyone thought was still furious at Bron Breakker, who everyone assumed was going to attack Bron at any moment, suddenly turned and absolutely leveled Brock Lesnar with a devastating clothesline that came out of nowhere. Brock went down hard, clearly not expecting the attack, clearly caught completely off guard. And before anyone could react, before the crowd could even fully process what was happening, Bron Breakker joined in, attacking Brock with the same vicious intensity, showing that he and Bronson had somehow reconciled their differences and were now working together. But the biggest shock was still to come, and this is the part that had everyone in the arena and everyone watching at home absolutely losing their minds. Paul Heyman, instead of looking shocked or trying to help Brock or calling for security, just stood there with this smile slowly spreading across his face, and then he raised his microphone and said something that nobody will forget, something that made it instantly clear that he had orchestrated this entire thing, that this attack wasn't spontaneous chaos but a carefully planned coup. Paul said, and I'm paraphrasing because the exact words are hard to make out over the crowd noise, something like, "Did you really think I was going to let you destroy everything I built? Did you really think you could undermine me and disrespect me and there wouldn't be consequences? This is my vision, Brock, it always has been, and now everyone will see that I'm the one in control." And with those words, Paul Heyman revealed that he had been playing everyone, that his apparent fear and nervousness had been an act, that he had secretly brought Bronson Reed and Bron Breakker back together and convinced them to help him overthrow Brock Lesnar and take complete control of the vision. Subscribe to Wrestling Discuss right now if you haven't already, because what I'm about to tell you about what happened next is going to make you understand why this is the most calculated and ruthless betrayal we've seen in years. Bronson and Bron continued their assault on Brock, and these are two massive powerful men who were absolutely destroying the beast incarnate, hitting him with their biggest moves, throwing him around the ring like he was nothing, showing no mercy whatsoever. And the crazy thing is that Brock Lesnar, the man who has dominated everyone for 2 decades, couldn't mount any kind of meaningful defense because he was so shocked by the betrayal, so caught off guard by the fact that Paul had outmaneuvered him, that he couldn't get his bearings and fight back effectively. Other members of the Vision started coming out from the back, and everyone thought they were coming to help Brock, but instead they joined in on the attack, revealing that Paul had gotten to all of them, had convinced all of them that their futures were better served by aligning with him instead of with Brock. The beating went on for what felt like forever, and the announcers were losing their minds trying to call the action, trying to make sense of what was happening, trying to explain to the audience that the Vision hadn't just imploded, it had been taken over in a calculated coup orchestrated by Paul Heyman. Security finally rushed the ring and broke things up, but by then the damage was done, both physically and psychologically. Brock was left laying in the ring, battered and beaten, while Paul stood on the ramp flanked by Bron, and the other members of the Vision who had joined the attack, all of them staring down at Brock with looks of satisfaction and triumph. And Paul grabbed the microphone one more time and delivered what might be the most chilling line of his entire career, saying something like, "This is what happens when you forget that the man with the plan will always defeat the man with just the power. This is what happens when you underestimate Paul Heyman. And then the Vision's music hit, but it wasn't the same version of the music, it had been slightly altered, symbolizing that this was a new era of the Vision, Paul's vision, and Brock Lesnar was no longer part of it. Now let me break down exactly what this means and why this is so significant, because Wrestling Discuss is not just going to tell you what happened, we're going to help you understand the implications and the psychology behind it. First and foremost, this attack represents the most successful manipulation and long-term planning we've seen from Paul Heymon in years, maybe ever. Think about everything that happened leading up to this moment. Paul and Brock's public falling out, everyone assumed that was legitimate tension that was tearing the group apart. The fight between Bronson Reed and Bron Breakker, everyone thought that was real animosity that had permanently divided them. Paul's apparent fear and nervousness in recent weeks, everyone bought that as genuine emotion from a man who had lost control of his faction. But it was all an act, all part of Paul's plan to create chaos and confusion while he worked behind the scenes to turn everyone against Brock and position himself as the true leader of the Vision. Paul understood something that Brock never grasped, which is that in a faction environment, the person who controls the loyalty of the group is the person with the real power, not necessarily the person who can beat everyone up physically. Brock assumed that being the toughest and most dominant meant he would naturally be the leader, but he never bothered to actually build relationships with the other members of the Vision, never made them feel valued or important, never gave them reasons to be loyal to him beyond fear and intimidation. Paul, meanwhile, spent months talking to Bronson and Bron and the others, selling them on a vision of the Vision where they would have more opportunities and more spotlight, where they wouldn't just be muscle for Brock Lesnar but would be featured stars in their own right. He played to their egos, their ambitions, their desire for recognition, and he convinced them that their path to success ran through him, not through Brock. The reconciliation between Bronson Reed and Bron Breakker is particularly fascinating and shows how brilliant Paul's manipulation was, and this is exactly the kind of analysis you only get from Wrestling Discuss, so make sure you're subscribed and you've hit that notification bell. These two men genuinely hated each other, they had real beef stemming from their own power struggle and their own conflicting ambitions. But Paul somehow convinced both of them that their real enemy wasn't each other, it was Brock, and that if they could put aside their differences and work together to overthrow Brock, then afterward they could figure out their own issues without Brock's shadow hanging over everything. Paul essentially told them that the pie would be bigger for everyone once Brock was gone, that they would both have more opportunities and more success by working together under Paul's guidance than by continuing to fight each other while Brock controlled everything from above. And somehow, incredibly, Paul got them to buy into that vision enough to set aside their hatred and work together for this coordinated attack. Let me address what I know a lot of you are thinking right now, and drop a comment if this was your first reaction to, how could Brock Lesnar, the most dangerous and perceptive competitor in WWE, not see this coming? How could he not realize that Paul was manipulating everyone and planning this coup? And the answer reveals something really important about Brock's character and his blind spots that Wrestling Discuss has talked about before. Brock's entire approach to wrestling and to life is based on physical dominance and intimidation. He believes that if you're the toughest person in the room, if you can beat up anyone who challenges you, then you don't need to worry about politics or manipulation or people plotting against you. He has contempt for what he sees as weakness or sneakiness. He values direct confrontation and physical power above all else. So when Paul was working behind the scenes, having quiet conversations with other members of the Vision, building coalitions and making promises and turning people against Brock, Brock either didn't notice because he wasn't paying attention to that kind of activity, or he noticed but dismissed it as irrelevant because he assumed his physical dominance would always trump Paul's scheming. That arrogance, that assumption that might makes right and that physical power is the only power that matters, that's what allowed Paul to orchestrate this coup without Brock seeing it coming. Brock was so focused on maintaining his position through intimidation and violence that he never bothered to secure the actual loyalty of the people around him, never built the relationships and alliances that would have protected him from this kind of betrayal. And now he's paying the price for that oversight, left lying in the ring while Paul stands triumphant, having outplayed him completely. It's a masterclass in how intelligence and planning can overcome brute force, and it's going to be fascinating to see how Brock responds to being outmaneuvered in this way, because I don't think it's ever happened to him before in his entire career. Now let's talk about what this means for the Vision moving forward as a faction, because this isn't just a story about Brock getting betrayed, this is about the fundamental nature and direction of the group changing completely. Under Brock's leadership, such as it was, the Vision was all about domination through physical destruction, about using overwhelming force to crush anyone in their path, about intimidation and brutality. It was effective in the short term, but it was also unsustainable because it created no loyalty and no cohesion. Everyone was just following Brock out of fear rather than genuine alignment with his goals. Under Paul's leadership, the Vision is going to be something completely different, and Wrestling Discuss is going to be following this evolution closely, so make sure you stay subscribed for all our coverage. Paul's vision is going to be about strategic dominance, about manipulating the system and the people in power, about positioning his followers for maximum success through careful planning rather than just random destruction. Paul is going to make every member of the Vision feel important and valued, is going to give them spotlight and opportunities, is going to build their loyalty by showing them that following his guidance leads to championships and main event positions. Where Brock ran the Vision like a dictatorship where everyone served him, Paul is going to run it more like a criminal organization where everyone benefits from being part of the family. Now, that doesn't mean there won't be conflicts and internal struggles, because Paul's Vision still includes massive egos like Brinson Reed and Bron Breakker who are going to have their own ambitions and their own desires for dominance. But Paul is smart enough to manage those conflicts and keep everyone pointed in the same direction, at least for now, at least until he's achieved whatever his ultimate goals are. And that's what makes this new version of the Vision potentially even more dangerous than the Brock-led version, because they are not just going to be mindlessly attacking people, they are going to be working together strategically to take over WWE from the inside. Let me talk about the fan reaction to this attack because it's been absolutely wild and it shows how divisive this moment is, and Wrestling Discuss wants to hear from all of you, so drop a comment with your honest thoughts. Some fans are absolutely loving this storyline. They think it's brilliant long-term storytelling. They appreciate the complexity of Paul's manipulation and the way everything that seemed random and chaotic was actually part of a larger plan. They are excited to see Paul as the leader of a faction because his strength has always been as a manager and strategist, and they think the Vision will be better and more interesting with Paul in charge instead of Brock. These fans are praising WWE for doing something unpredictable, for subverting expectations by having the intellectual manipulator defeat the physical powerhouse, for creating a moment that genuinely shocked people and got everyone talking. But there are also fans who are upset about this development, and their concerns are valid and worth discussing here on Wrestling Discuss because we believe in presenting all perspectives. Some fans feel like Brockles are being taken out by a group attack makes him look weak and diminishes his aura as the most dominant force in WWE. They argue that Brock should never be portrayed as vulnerable to scheming and manipulation because his character is supposed to be above all that political nonsense, supposed to be so physically dominant that none of those mind games matter. They are worried that this storyline damages Brock's character permanently and makes him just another wrestler who can be outmaneuvered rather than the unstoppable force he's been presented as for 2 decades. Other fans are concerned that the Vision is becoming too complicated, that all these betrayals and power struggles and shifting alliances are hard to follow and take away from the simple appeal of watching dominant wrestlers destroy people, which is what they tuned in for in the first place. Wrestling Discuss wants to know where you stand on this, so engage with our community in the comments right now. Do you think this Paul Heyman coup was brilliant storytelling that adds depth and complexity to the Vision? Or do you think it's unnecessarily complicated and damages Brockles' character? Do you want to see the Vision continue under Paul's leadership with this new strategic approach? Or do you want to see Brock mount a comeback and destroy everyone who betrayed him? There's no wrong answer. Wrestling Discuss values all perspectives, and the discussion we have in our comments section is what makes this channel special and what separates us from other wrestling news channels that just tell you what to think instead of encouraging actual conversation. Now let me get into some speculation about where this storyline goes from here, and Wrestling Discuss has some inside information from sources close to the situation that I'm going to share with you exclusively. First, don't expect to see Brock Lesnar on television for at least a few weeks, maybe even a month or more. WWE is going to sell the attack as having legitimately injured Brock, keeping him off TV while they build up Paul's Vision and establish the new dynamic. This serves multiple purposes. It gives Brock time to sell the severity of the beating, it allows the Vision to operate without the shadow of Brock hanging over them, and it builds anticipation for Brock's inevitable return and his quest for revenge. When Brock does come back, and he absolutely will come back, it's going to be with a singular focus on destroying everyone who betrayed him, and Wrestling Discuss expects that we're going to see a more vicious and more personal version of Brock than we've ever seen before because this isn't just about winning matches, this is about revenge and redemption. Second, expect Paul Heyman to cut some of the best promos of his career over the next few weeks as he establishes himself as the undisputed leader of the Vision and explains his philosophy and his plans for the group. Paul is going to talk about how he was always the brains behind Brock's success, how Brock would have been nothing without Paul's guidance and advocacy, how Brock made the fatal mistake of thinking he didn't need Paul anymore. He's going to position himself as a genius who's been playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers, and he's going to make the case that the Vision is going to accomplish even more under his leadership than they ever could have under Brock's. Wrestling Discuss is going to be breaking down every one of these Paul Heyman promos, analyzing the psychology and the rhetoric and the implications, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of that content. Third, and this is where things get really interesting, Wrestling Discuss has heard from sources that there are plans for Brinson Reed and Bron Breakker to become the featured muscle of Paul's Vision, positioned as the twin destroyers who handle the physical domination while Paul handles the strategy and the talking. This makes sense because both men are incredibly talented and have been underutilized, and this is their opportunity to break through to that next level by being the centerpiece of a major faction. But here's the thing that Wrestling Discuss is watching closely. These two men still have egos, they still have ambitions, and they are both going to want to be the number one guy. Paul managed to get them working together to take down Brock, but can he keep them working together long term? Or are we going to see another internal power struggle develop, this time between Brinson and Bryn over who's Paul's true right-hand man? That's going to be a fascinating dynamic to watch play out, and Wrestling Discuss will be covering every development. Let me also address the elephant in the room that a lot of wrestling fans are probably thinking about, which is whether this storyline has real-life components or whether it's purely kayfabe. And here's what Wrestling Discuss can tell you based on our sources and our analysis: it's complicated. There absolutely have been real tensions between Brock Lesnar and Paul Heyman over the years. They've had legitimate disagreements about business decisions and creative directions, and their relationship has gone through multiple cycles of alliance and separation. So when you see them feuding on television, there's probably at least some authentic emotion underneath the performance, even if the specific storyline is scripted. As for Brinson Reed and Bryn Breakker, their previous conflict and their current alliance are almost certainly entirely storyline driven, but the ambitions and egos that are being portrayed in the storyline are exaggerated versions of real personality traits that both men have. So like most wrestling storylines, this is a blend of reality and fiction, with real emotions and real relationships being used as the foundation for scripted storytelling. And that's actually what makes modern wrestling so compelling and what Wrestling Discuss exists to help you navigate and understand. The line between real life and storyline is deliberately blurred, and part of the fun is trying to figure out what's real and what's performance, trying to understand the genuine backstage dynamics while also appreciating the fictional narrative being told. Wrestling Discuss is uniquely positioned to help you with that analysis because we have sources throughout the industry who give us insights into what's really happening behind the scenes, and we combine that insider knowledge with critical analysis of what we see on television to give you the most complete picture possible. That's why if you're a serious wrestling fan who wants to go deeper than just watching the shows, if you want to really understand this business and all its complexities, you absolutely need to be subscribed to Wrestling Discuss. Let me wrap this up by talking about the biggest questions that this attack raises and that Wrestling Discuss is going to be investigating and answering in our upcoming videos. Question 1. How is Brock Lesnar going to respond when he returns, and who is he going to target first? Is he going to go directly after Paul Heyman as the mastermind of the betrayal, or is he going to systematically destroy every member of the Vision who participated in the attack before finally getting to Paul? Question 2. Can Paul Heyman actually keep the Vision united under his leadership, or is this just going to be another power struggle that eventually tears the group apart? Question 3. What does this mean for the championship picture? Because the Vision under Paul's strategic guidance could potentially control multiple titles if they work together effectively. Question 4. Are there any current WWE stars who might align with Brock to help him get revenge, or is he going to wage this war entirely on his own? And question 5, the big one that everyone's wondering, is this the permanent end of the Brock Lesnar and Paul Heyman partnership, or could they somehow reconcile down the line? Wrestling Discuss doesn't have all the answers to these questions yet, and frankly WWE Creative probably doesn't have all the answers figured out yet either because they are going to see how fans respond and adjust the storyline accordingly. But that's why you need to stay subscribed to Wrestling Discuss and keep coming back for our coverage, because as this story develops, as new information comes out, as the next chapters of this saga unfold, we're going to be right here analyzing everything, giving you the insider information you can't get anywhere else, and helping you understand not just what's happening but why it's happening and what it means for the future of WWE. Hit that subscribe button right now, turn on notifications, and join the Wrestling Discuss community of fans who want real analysis and real insider information instead of just surface-level recap content. Alright, I need you to do something for me right now before this video ends. I need you to drop a comment telling me your honest reaction to the Vision turning on Brock Lesnar and Paul Heyman taking over the faction. Were you shocked by this betrayal or did you see it coming? Do you think this was the right creative decision or should Brock have remained in control? Who do you want to see win this war between Brock and Paul's Vision? Your thoughts and opinions matter to the Wrestling Discuss community, and I read every single comment because hearing from you is what makes this channel special. Also hit that like button to help this video reach more wrestling fans, and share this video on your social media and with your wrestling group chats because everyone needs to know about this shocking turn of events and Wrestling Discuss is the place to come for the best coverage and analysis. Thank you so much to everyone who made it all the way to the end of this video. The fact that you stuck with me through this entire breakdown shows that you're a true wrestling fan who appreciates deep analysis and insider information. Wrestling Discuss exists for fans like you, fans who want more than just highlights and recaps, fans who want to understand the business and the psychology and the real dynamics behind what happens on television. We're going to have much more coverage of this Brock vs. Paul's Vision storyline in the coming days and weeks, plus we'll be covering every other major wrestling story from WWE, AEW, and around the world. Wrestling Discuss is your source for everything happening in professional wrestling, delivered with honesty, insight, and passion. This is Wrestling Discuss. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this incredible community, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll continue breaking down all the biggest stories and most shocking moments in wrestling. Keep the conversation going in the comments, stay subscribed for more exclusive content and insider information, and remember that Wrestling Discuss is always here to give you the truth about what's really happening in the wrestling world. Take care everyone, keep discussing, and I'll catch you next time.